the site of the former Spofford Juvenile Detention Center located at Hunts Point. We started our conceptual review in April of 2017. On behalf of EDC and the whole design and development team, I would like to thank you for all of the offline reviews and working sessions that have gotten us to this point. We're here today for your preliminary review of Phase 1, the Building 1A Light Industrial and Commercial, and Building 1A Residential. Presenting today are Claire Weiss from WXY and Victor Bobby-Lawson of Bobby-Lawson Architects.
Good morning.
Okay, great.
We just wanted to go through our slides very quickly so that we could do the substantive work at the end. The slides are organized this way. As you can see, this is the site. The Spofford site has an existing building there that used to house the Spofford Detention Center. It's located in the South Bronx. And these are contextual photographs. I'm sure you've seen this in the past. The project that we're talking about right now would be Phase 1, which is located on the eastern side, actually the western side of the site. The site is oriented north, south, and east-west. And we're looking at Phase 1. This is the master plan, or the overall plan, as we indicated and shown to you in the past. The buildings would be, there would be 5 buildings in total. Building 1A, B, 2A, B, and 3. They are grouped around the central plaza and bifurcated by a walkway that moves through the site from Oneida to Tiffany. Spofford is the major street that links all of the sites together. And we're looking at 1A and 1B. Again, this site is in Phase 1, and this sort of shows you the boundaries of Phase 1. Programmatically, the site has the central plaza that I indicated earlier. There's a playground to the north of the site, and 1A will be a light industrial building. 1B will have a commercial base with some community facility functions and a residential above. 2A will be a residential as well as 2B and 3. They all, particularly 2B and 3, will have commercial and community facility spaces on the base of the buildings. Again, this is showing 1B. The slide is oriented slightly differently. This is, again, to just orient you, this is north, and this is south, this is west, and that's Spofford and Tiffany. The entrances into the building will be this is going to be a pedestrian entrance for the and I just want to finish with this. Will be the entrance for the residents. Commercial entrances will be on the bases of the buildings, and that's right.
Okay, I'm going to just quickly go through what has evolved since you all last saw this as well. So here is 1B. And this is the alignment with Tiffany. So we're looking at entrances. So again, with the commercial, there's a bank, our second means of egress, the residential lobby, including a bike room, and then also other offices to support the building, a dance studio, kind of back of house, green room, etc., and a dance theater, and then this promenade or step street between, and a shared lobby here for the second floor, which I'll show you in a minute. 1A, which is focused on food production, has gone through really a lot of work in reconciling the loading, creating a shared corridor, really looking at garbage and other things. And we, in the end, have flipped the brewery to the corner site. both from a noise point of view, but also from a functionality point of view. And really gotten right-sized food production spaces that are affordable, and then put the bakery, which was on the corner here, right on this site. Okay, going quickly through the plan. So the second floor, as I mentioned, the lobby, again, here's the exit stair. There are 2 elevators. This elevator also serves as access for wheelchairs to the upper level of the plaza, so it can function that way. And this is where, as you come up the stairs from the lobby, this is the amenity floor. So there's a gym, there's a child room, there's laundry, and separately, there are some residential units that are facing north. On the second floor, again, it's kind of a split level. There's a larger production studio. There's another food production space. Again, the access can be from the upper level. And then there is lobby access right off Spofford. So really everything connects to the street. And then there's catering, which will offer food service that comes right off this level. There's a ramp as well for them to move things up and down. Upper level, again, amenity space for the residents, a roof terrace. And you can just see that there's a mezzanine space onto where the north light clear stories are for the natural light photo studio. And then upper levels in terms of setbacks of the 2-part building that we'll explain much more in the massing, and then the tallest part of the building with, again, as the elevators come up, there's a glass piece, so natural light. We try to emphasize getting natural light into the elevators, over a green roof. And then, as Victor noted, there is solar on this roof, and there's a certain amount of solar on this roof. And you can see how that lays out in terms of the sections. And again, the section through how the brewery, and I wanted to point out that instead of having the terrace on this side, because really this prioritizes the plaza, we all came to the realization that actually having a terrace that served the media, the photo studio, and the brewery right on the street side would be less noisy for residents, but also would serve the vitality of the street, and really was on the corner, and was easy to access from the elevator bay. So I think that, again, this is worth noting because the alignments really emphasize now the courtyard. Here's the central plaza. There is a residential terrace also off of it. It really steps down, and because of the way the grade works, there's a lower area that can gain some natural light because of the existing grade on Tiffany. I think Victor's going to get into this on the other slides, but I just want to point out that we really looked at the materiality, and I think Victor will grab those, of this lower base being metal, and the kind of lighter colored. And this right now is polycarbonate. It's kind of a lantern onto the site, glazing here. And this is going back, here's the courtyard, and you can see the grading. And what happens is that base, as you go, maybe it's that this base really aligns more on the courtyard side. And these are just 1A, so that it's, as we get into the details. But you can see what happens on both the north facade, you get this stepping down towards Tiffany, and you get, as you are on this step street, I call it, you get the stepping up of the base here. And we think that breaks down the massing. Okay.
As Claire said, we really looked and wanted to articulate the base of the building as much as possible, and to integrate the 2 buildings so that the materiality flowed from one to the other. Also, we already realized that the site slopes. So we looked at the context, we looked at the different kinds of brick that were used on the site, looked at different sites, and thought that we could come up with using a brick that was somewhat similar to the context. So we looked at 1B, which is again, because this was going to be our pilot building, we wanted to establish a relationship between our building and the site. As you can see, the other buildings that would have different kinds of brick tone, and we're looking at brick as the basis for the project. We also wanted this building, which is almost like a lantern, which has been skewed off of the regular grid, to look like it was a tower that became a center for the project. So we're looking at that as a site or a building that would be lighter than the others. So you get these sort of ground buildings, and this one being a figure of one in the middle. Again, these are images of our site and our project. The 1A building would have this metal, almost high-tech look to it, which would now be related to the base of 1B. This is 1B, 2A, and 2B, and 3. We wanted the brick to also have texture, as opposed to just being plain. So you would see, if you zoomed in, you would see that there's some textural moves that are being created by moving the brick in and out. So this is,
this is what we previously submitted, and we're going to compare it to what now our update is.
again, texture, as we said earlier, texture in terms of color, texture in terms of texture. We looked at things around windows. We looked at gray as a color. We looked at things like translucency in 1A building, and we looked at standing seam metal in the project, and wanted to incorporate all of this into the project.
So I think we're saying 1A is a really interesting phase to start, because you have a unique building to the site, right beside what will be the first of a number of pieces where the kind of community facility is at the bottom of the building with housing above. And so the key kind of massing elements is the base, as Victor talked about, but also what got developed was sort of where the circulation entry is, a seam between the two pieces that carries up here, that we are looking at as the smooth in terms of texture piece, and the shorter piece is the rough. So that's really where more of the kind of turn pattern happens, and this is the smoother piece. Again, there's a lot going on in this building and a lot of pressure on it, so we try to also really push to be relatively simple. So I'm going to just go over these materials, and Victor will go over the thinking. Is that, again, we were looking at a kind of galvanized feel with an really architectural precast, which might end up being more like the stone kind of precast, very much in this cast. But kind of neutral, but at the same time work well with the metal. We have a lot of kind of garage doors. We're looking at a bifold system right now. And we're also looking at really glazing and kind of aluminum mullions on the glazing to enliven the facades. There's the polycarbonate and the standing seam metal are kind of supposed to play together, and then we'll have glass in the larger to smaller dormers. Again, probably with some, they're going to be north facing to get light in, and they get smaller towards the residential building. Again, to emphasize the corner, but to minimize any light, kind of light passage to where people's apartment windows are. And so you can kind of see that palette altogether.
From a regional standpoint, if you imagine driving on the Brockner Boulevard, you would see essentially this light well, and also on Tiffany itself, the idea of the translucency at night. The second floor of 1A is going to be a venue that would be used for filming So we wanted the light from a local standpoint to be a part of the street, and also from a regional standpoint, you would see the top of 1B at night, because that would be the entrance. Actually, I'm just going to show you that right here. So this is somewhat of a lantern that we imagine that would have some kind of a regional relationship, whereas this would be a local when it's lit at night. So we're thinking about light and how it works with the site and how it creates a sense of balance or a sense of scale for people that walk there. Again, this is the detailing of what we are thinking of. This would be metal, standing ribbed metal panels around, which would be surrounded by brick. And again, it sort of shows you the standing scene, which is also related to the 1A building. These are images of what we're presenting to you today, as Brad mentioned earlier. Yeah, without and this is exactly what we brought, the brick samples that we would like to get your input on. Just some details of what we, how the wall assemblies are going.
Yeah, let me just point this out, just it might be easier. So we have 8 inches from face of brick to where the window is, and so therefore there's a kind of play between the metal panel, which is 3.5 inches back, and the brick. So there's that amount of play. Can you go to the next one, Victoria? Yes. Then on the kind of what I call the rough, the texture, essentially the bricks are coming out like 3/4 of an inch from the face of where the smooth is. And that's really, again, in trying to be both kind of understanding the limits of the system and also selecting some bricks that maybe have a lot more handmade materiality than the one we submitted at the very beginning, which is actually this. I'm going to put this in here. You can compare it to what was submitted. That we're kind of really looking at how the pieces get kind of differentiated also with the texture and pattern of the brick.
Also the relationship between handmade and very technologically produced materials like metal panels, things that are sharp or things that are very focused in terms of. So the idea of creating texture on the facade, the idea of creating subtle light and shadow pieces on the facade are things that we want about.
Is this it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this shows you again the kind of storefront to that texture with this idea of a C channel also that divides at the very top of the base. That kind of we play within 1A and 1B a bit differently. I think the next one. Then there were some, just to kind of fully go through, there's been a lot of updates on the landscape plan, and I wanted to just zoom in, Elizabeth's not here today, to the planter detail, the latest, which I know got up, next slide, updated. So the idea of this is that it isn't a triangle, it's sort of a rotated square. So we don't really, yes, there is a little bit of a kind of point here, but this is, you can see in the plan. But Elizabeth's idea is to actually kind of make planter guard and seating. And we think it works really well with the entrances, but we have a very wide sidewalk here. The advantage of having pushed the buildings back, and that this really, we think, could be maintained, but actually work really well in terms of, because the monastery comes out. So this kind of integrates that wall of the monastery, which otherwise you have a dead end, into kind of reinforcing the flow of the sidewalk versus the, I'm hanging out, I've got my stroller, getting out of the lobby of my building kind of stuff. I think we're at the end.
Just some
Just a sense. Oh, we should explain a little bit the concrete stairs and the granite. So if you go back one again. So there is basically concrete in the bigger monumental stairs through and granite really at the, what I call the passage or the stairs that are going to be used the most. And I think we all felt like, especially for this entrance, even though it's a bit more costly, integrating real stone into the step street would be a kind of wonderful thing. And also, if done properly, it will last a lot longer in terms of freeze thaw.
Also, as Claire said, we moved the building back from the lot line, which is the red, to this location. So this diagonal is also a suggestion that this very important street is there. So we wanted to move you, and most of your traffic would come, pedestrian traffic would come.
And this
from-
aligns with basically, here you can see that, right? This is, oh my God, maybe street. That's a street that
That's what's
is,
connected
yeah, that's connecting in from actually,
to the plaza, which is back here.
that's it.
Some landscaping.
Yeah, Elizabeth provided an update of some of the plant list as well, providing a bit more
Can you
variety.
just clarify,
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Yep, on the bricks, that's fine. These are just
This
for
is-
reference to kind of understand the scale and what's being built and not. I think there's one more,
This is.
just to understand the phasing, that we're here to talk about these buildings, but the context is really phase 2 and 3 as
So
well.
maybe with that image up, just a question. First of all, fantastic, I have to say, project, incredibly thorough, and I really appreciate the attention to the detail with the brick facing and the working on the shadow and the materials together, thinking about them all together, the light building and the brick building. I mean, it's, and a landscape as well, which I'm sure we'll get into in some detail. But I want to understand where, you know, the flat, smooth is, where the rough is, you know, maybe looking here. And then you get some vertical pieces. Is
Right.
that before, or is that now?
So
Vertical bricks, excuse me.
this is an old resident.
Yeah.
Let's back
We
to
go
the
back to the
elevations.
elevations.
Yeah.
Or that axo is probably the easiest way to
Or the
explain
axo.
it.
Yeah, so,
Right.
So this,
Yeah, let's
so
go.
what is your first, you'd say option one that you're
Maybe we
proposing?
should do the elevations at the very beginning, because
There's
Well,
no-
all these
What about if you go
conditions,
forward,
no,
though?
forward, keep going. I was thinking of the flat elevation show.
There,
Well,
this
Yeah.
one would be helpful.
Yeah, where's
Yeah.
smooth, where's rough?
So rough is this whole piece.
And rough is that.
No, rough is really the pattern.
yeah,
Oh,
so the
whatever-
texture.
the-
of-
Whatever we choose, it's basically pushing the bricks out 3/4 of an inch.
Okay.
Right,
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
I call it, this is maybe more graphic, this is the corduroy building, and this is the smooth building.
Right.
So the entire building, as its
Okay.
prominent pattern, it has essentially corduroy, right now horizontal.
Horizontal.
And there's a reasoning for that. I mean, this is the entrance. That's the lantern that we were talking about, that culminates this way. And then this bar now continues. So it now becomes like this sort of wall that is a contextual wall around 2A that will come down the line.
Now, the different panel strategies, if we go back to the elevations, really are a result of both units and what's north of the big elevations. Yeah, before that. Perfect.
Yes,
Perfect.
yeah.
So this has the larger family units, and it gave us, and this is the smooth building, it gave us the opportunity to pull out, because the window, these long panels of both metal and brick. When you go to the south facade, we have the brick dominates more, and here's the rough building, and here's the smooth in the back. And in that case, basically there's, the metal kind of increases at the carrot, but the brick in general dominates. We've made this darker just so you can understand that as the rough building, but it's not, it's
It's
a
just
coating,
texture.
just texture.
Yes.
So if we go to the
I just want to say one thing about this. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Go back. We wanted to relate this to 1A. So the base of 1A gets pulled into here, but then it gets, because 1A grows when it meets the plaza, it's also brought back onto the higher part of the site. So there's that relationship, there's the plaza relationship, and there's the Tiffany Street.
So there are these kind of, you get both the brick and the ribbons of metal idea, and part of that, especially, and that's almost mostly with the smooth building. With the rough building, we felt with the texture there was enough going on, that it's mostly about being a brick building. So if you go back, the facade, to the short facades.
This one, let's go back this way.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
And so you can really kind of see that this shorter holds a corner. When we get to that kind of the zipper thing, the metal emerges again.
And this is what we meant by,
And this is,
bringing
again,
this-
back to the kind of ribbons of metal, which then turns around the corner. I think there's one more facade for this, yes. So I think you kind of see it really clearly here,
So
where you
this-
have a brick building and a kind of metal brick building, and the smooth and the rough.
So this is metal going up, this darker is
All brick.
brick, but
Brick.
it's the corduroy.
It's the
Exactly.
corduroy, it's all the corduroy brick, and
exactly.
you'll see in the details, when you see lighter, that's where the stack one is. So the corduroy, except for right beside the windows instead of the metal panel, you get the same color brick, but smooth, like stack one, without texture. So around the windows, you still get that sort of shadow box effect. Which is very hard to depict, which is why we sort of zoomed in on the kind of zoom ins about the three types. So this was the original, which was all one color, true red. Then we kind of looked through it again, and these could change, but the idea is that 3 is the darkest. That ideally I call it the parallelogram building is smooth, you know, it has a FGRC, like a more non-brick.
Yeah.
And that we were thinking that there might be something like this for the Phase 2 buildings. So really these 3 are what we brought. This one is obviously it's smooth, but it varies in color. These 2, we have preferences, both of us are kind of on the same page, are much more of a brick that looks handmade. This has a more precise cut than this, we think is interesting.
So what are you advocating?
Like this, out of all of them.
And we're juxtaposing it against
Yeah.
all these sharp edges, and so it's got a rustic, kindly look about it, but at the same time.
I think the color is nice with the galvanized and the metal.
And then the different sort of hues of clay. Yes.
Yeah.
We think it has a lot of character as well.
Did you say that the Phase 2 building?
Well, we're looking at, again, one like that, and I'll call it, one like that.
Yes,
For
two.
Phase 2.
For the mass, the Phase 2 buildings are higher?
No, they're all.
Just
No,
one of them.
Which one
One
did
of
the
them.
AXO? Only one,
Only one.
which is, we're thinking about this sort of,
More metal and
Yeah.
more
maybe
stone-like
it's not
building,
to
right?
So this building,
oh, we have,
This
yeah,
is a
he shows them
tall
that AXO,
building.
there's an
right
X.
yeah, let's go to,
in the middle,
let's go to the,
other direction,
yeah.
perfect. Draw the plans.
It should actually be at the end.
There, okay, you had it. There.
Yes,
there.
right.
So-
So this, but
This is slightly taller, but as you can see in the end, because of Unicap, they break down differently, and they're going up the hill. But, the alignments these are the same. Phase 3 is the same height as the new building going up on the corner. This is the absolute lowest building, this steps. That was at Burnett Place, comes through, but it steps lower. But they're roughly similar. I mean, we're talking about the floor.
And it seems-
14, 14 versus 13.
And it seems like this 2A was more in kind of a yellow orange
Yes,
Yes.
family and red.
yeah, exactly. It was more I call that like natural brick, that terracotta versus a kind of more red brick.
and as we said earlier, this whole thing was sort of designed to let as much light, southern light, into the central plaza, so that this is low and these are somewhat high.
I mean, in the end, that color, you know, at first we showed something really dark. We think this sort of brown brick might be a nice complement, that sort of deep brown.
So just one question about when I zoom in on this image and I look at the kind of reveal between 1B
Yeah.
and 1A.
Yes.
You know, conceptually, it seems like you wanted it to relate to the glazing piece that faces the green roof
Yes.
up there. But in the elevation, I mean, because it's not circulation,
No, it's not.
there are apartments in there.
There
There
are
are
apartments.
So it's not going to light up separately as a slot.
No, it won't.
So it doesn't really read in the same way in the elevation as it does in terms of the massing.
No, yeah, this
Yes,
will light,
it
this
won't
will
at
light up.
night.
But what's interesting is the
Section.
lobby and the canopy do align with it.
Yeah.
So we were thinking it was still, this is really diagrammatic, but it was still worth the effort. The other thing is you know, we're still looking at the shade of metal, like we have a darker shade integrated with the brick, and then we have a lighter galvanized shade. So you could play with that still to make it more, read more.
I mean, not to mess with the cooking here, but it seems like the lighter shades articulate
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
front piece from the back is an interesting idea that you're pursuing in this axon
Yeah.
here. And I know it kind of got part of that other metal, but I mean, I really appreciate the work that you guys are
Because we
doing.
think the mullions being more like charcoal metal with a metal panel will help push it back.
Right.
But then with this, we really thought the retail and the base really need a lighter, like a metal to pop. So that, I hadn't thought
And
of
also,
that. But you could, that's where you could use that lighter metal on both of them.
Is there
So
another
that's-
color, is there another metal that's on this dark?
Yeah,
For
that's
this,
that.
for this piece you're talking
For
about.
this
Yes, for the
piece,
entrance
Yes,
piece.
So what I'm saying is
it
that,
seems like you have one or the other, so
Yes.
there's two choices, A or B. Is
Oh,
there a
I think
third
we-
Go
choice?
with the
I
light.
think we think there should be two. I guess we
Yes.
didn't, oh, there it is. The darker and the, is there, for the, around the windows, there it is. I think that's
So that's-
windows, and then we were thinking, right?
This is the one in the slot?
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
slot.
So right now, but it could be, you could shift it to
Or silver.
It's got these brick stuff.
Right.
So this is like the C channel and all of the Dutch metal. These are the retail mullions, and these are upper.
It doesn't even start here.
Yeah,
This piece, which is nicer, I think, so.
yeah, this is the.
Because I think
This is
that's how the
it.
light's gonna hit it too, right?
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
Is that east? Is that east?
That's west.
Oh, that's
It's
west.
west.
Totally turned around. Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's west.
so these, I know. these-
So the idea is to emphasize the entrance.
Yeah.
As much as
Well,
possible. With all of
This
those
will look
entrances.
like steel
Yeah,
in the end,
yeah, I think that's.
whereas this tends to look like. Great. Oh, here's the big house.
So the,
I mean,
Yeah.
no, not speaking about
There's
the
the
design,
darker, sorry.
just I think the design is great. The 1A building, which we haven't talked as much about, it's a beautiful and unusual building to be built as part of a larger complex. And I think it is critical to your entire design. Speaking as a developer, and I don't know anything about this deal or anything about it whatsoever, it's an extremely unlikely building to find as part of a complex. So who's ever organized the financing for this really either should be commended, and I would say we would watch carefully, that this continues to be, part of the plan, because it's clearly something that's a major gift to the community and a major gift to the city and an essential part of the overall plan. And I'd hate to see it in any way compromised or changed or in any way because it seems so important. So, I'm just going to say that I'm keeping my eye on that because I know how hard it is to do that, and I admire the commitment to do that, particularly as part of the first phase. So just make sure we continue to see that same very beautiful, very important community-related building as this continues through the process.
Well, I think we went through a user and
Great.
exercise in order to represent a building that is,
I'm
very
delighted that someone wants it, number one. But even for someone who wants it, it's still
Oh,
going
yes.
to require a significant subsidy without question in order for it to really exist. So I think it's great. I'm in for it, but I want to urge everyone to keep it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to this team and to EDC for really working with us. As you all know, we've been working on really trying to get this affordable housing design question kind of to a higher level, and I think this project has, in all the different ways of process and interagency collaboration and really committed developer and design team to get a result that we can all be proud of. So
I agree.
Thank
Bravo.
you.
And I'm Jeff Dugan, Principal Gatner Architects. We're the designers for the 116 precinct, new station house in Rosedale, Queens. Our team is here. Everybody from our DEC team are here. The Design Excellence Program, Margaret Castillo, Philip Heller. I won't go through everybody, but Philip Heller is here representing NYPD. He's the key client here. Happy to work with him. On the design side, the people that you'll be hearing from, of course, asking questions of. I'll give an overview of the project in 10 minutes, and we can get into the Q&A. Paul Bauer, one of my partners, is here. He and I are leading the design on this project. We also have Jeffrey Poor here from Star White House Landscape Architects. And we have Katie Osborne from our team. She is Via Collective, Principal of Via Collective Graphic Designer and Signage. So, let me get started. You may be familiar, or should be familiar by now, Rosedale. The station is located in Rosedale, Queens. It's out near the Nassau County border. The site itself is on North Conduit Avenue. It's between North Conduit Avenue and the Long Island Railroad. It's a significant piece of infrastructure. There's a station right here. The site is a lot that includes the existing 105 precinct. Precinct annex, that is, and our building is going to be placed in the existing surface parking lot adjacent to that. Long, narrow site, you can see there's a red line around the perimeter. This is at the location is at the corner of 244th Street and North Conduit Avenue in Rosedale, Queens. The context, a little bit of context, you're probably familiar with it, having seen the package already, but one of the key components of the site is this access to Long Island Railroad. This is looking down 244th Street to the Long Island Railroad entrance. There's an underpass there and a station entrance with the platform above. The adjacent 105 annex designed in the form of sort of an old station house, an old railroad station house. There's the parking lot where the new building will be going to use in either direction, looking back to the 105 precinct. And then the neighborhood across the street, single-family housing, 1- and 2-story. Existing 105. Back up. Notice the parking along the street on North Conduit Avenue. That is going away. There's not going to be parking on Conduit Avenue. It's all going to be within the site. In front of the 105, we're going to have a parking lot, and behind, or to the south of the 116, there's going to be a parking lot. So all of the parking will be accommodated in those two lots and an adjacent lot that NYPD is also leasing. So let's move through this. Here's the context again. Our site there, neighborhood across the street. So an important function that the building serves really is to negotiate that difference between the hard infrastructure, the transit, and there's also some power lines here, and scale it down to the residential neighborhood there, while maintaining a civic presence. The building must have a civic presence that is a police precinct. But a key component of the program was to engage the community in the design. So we took, this is from a prior submission, we took the view access from 244th Street and that entrance point at the Long Island Railroad Station as a defining moment in engaging the community, because it's a natural passage. People cross the property now to go to the station. It's a great place to create a public open space. So our new building, taking into consideration some of the changes, we're going to be reviewing some of the changes along the way since we last submitted to you. Along the frontage, along North Conduit frontage, we have a planted zone, but we also have a fence, and we have to add security barriers relative to the threat assessment report. There will be There will be a gate here at the entrance to the parking lot in front of the 105, each of these entrances and exits. And there will be a gate here, the entrance to the parking lot, behind the 116. Security bollards have been incorporated into the project. You've probably seen it in the proposal. We were proposing precast concrete bollards, but city standard is stainless steel. If that's the case, we'll move forward with stainless steel. We haven't changed the presentation. Again, the partie really is for the building to move forward towards the street, where we can put the parking behind instead of in front. The existing building here, where we are incorporating parking in front, that main connection to the Long Island Railroad provides an opportunity for community engagement in an open space in front of the building. This was our design the last time we met. The building had a wrapping facade that the idea of the partie was to intertwine community and police within the building. The facade was going to capture part of the program in front of the building and wind it into the building. But there was a critique of that. We listened and we changed the design. The idea was to simplify this facade, to break the building into two pieces horizontally and shift it. So the facade has, we've always thought of this as a precast and glass facade for unitized construction, for quick construction, because we have a really intense deadline that DEC is keeping. It's a narrow priority project. So we have a precast concrete and glass facade on the top. It angles up a little bit, opens up to a community room on the corner, honorific position for a community room. This is a new program element. I think it's incorporated into the 4.0, right, Philip? Yes. And this is the second project that this has been incorporated into. Both the entrance to the police precinct and the community room face this open courtyard, this open plaza. However, the community room accesses off of North Conduit Avenue over here, while the police precinct entrance centered on the main facade is off of the public plaza. We've incorporated signage into the design and disorder control lights, some of the other issues that we had not shown before, hoping to incorporate them into the facade. That's what we have. The 116 sculptural quality of identity is here on the street. It's also over the entrance. We'll get into some graphic design issues a little later. Nighttime rendering. The community room glows, as well as the police precinct entrance. Very nice. We've got an entrance to the Long Island Railroad in the distance. So this all frames this whole public plaza. We incorporated the signage and the lighting on the flagpoles into a planter area. We're going to get into some of the integration of graphic design and landscape momentarily. This was our plan before. Some of the changes that we made include the vestibule, the entrance to the precinct, popping that out as a portal entrance. That's separate from the community room entrance, which is over here. Gives the community sort of independent opportunity to use that room. We presented this at the community board last week, and they're really excited about the community room, really excited about programming. They've already got things lined up, and I think that's great. It would be great if perhaps the community room had a name. Perhaps there could be a name. Somebody in the community could be named after. So I know NYPD is beginning to work with the community on that issue. The secondary entrance, main police entrance is here. So most of the public is coming in here. This is the main desk. You have to be escorted past this point to get further into the police facility. Prisoner processing is here, muster room, miscellaneous offices. But the community is engaged in this area we call the zone of interface. Second floor, there's not been a great deal of change here. Here's our new plan. Previously, we had a bit of a cutout here where the first floor slid out from the massing. We've simplified that, and we have basically four walls all around. One of the main things that we kept from before was this corridor with a view out to the Long Island Railroad here and a view to the community there, so you can stand anywhere along here and see daylight. One of the comments that you had recently was to try to get some daylight back here, and we thought that was a very good idea. We've got an open area. This is where our cooling towers are. They're positioned here. So there's the opportunity that this is unenclosed to get some daylight here. We're also getting some daylight from the stair transferring here at a side light. Cellar, not a big deal, mostly lockers. There's a lot of mechanical down here, no big changes. Under here we've got the gym down there. There it is. Here's our new locker room. Refining the design, stress reduction is what the gym is. On the roof we have a photovoltaic array that we've been planning. Here is an open section of the roof where that daylight would be coming in. A section of the roof that is popped up. This is a mechanical requirement, something we're working with. We're trying to tailor the building to the mechanical system. It's a very hardy mechanical system, so it's very difficult. We're not quite satisfied with the pop-up, but that's where we are. It'd be great if we could have the entire roof all at one level. That's one of the problems that we ran into in the disorder control lights, and we'll get into that in a minute, is that the lights need to be maintained from the roof. And because of that, and the pop-up here on the roof, we had a misalignment. So we're continuing to study that. We want all of the lights to align all the way around. Some sections through the buildings were our prior sections. You can see the embankment over to the left, the Long Island Railroad, and the relationship between the embankment and the power lines, and how the building steps down. The revision to this, in terms of programming and things, we had removed the roof monitor. We had a roof monitor that followed our main corridors, but due to correlation and coordination between structure and mechanical, and trying to keep the building as small as we can while meeting all the requirements of NYPD has been a challenge. So we're up at about 30 feet for our roof height. We're not able to keep the monitor, so right now we don't have a roof monitor, but we're looking at integrating something. We're going to study that a little bit further, something that doesn't follow the corridor, but something that's more in line with an opening that we have on the second floor over the main desk. Prior elevations, our wrapping facade has transitioned into two-volume shifting facade, so that this upper volume shifts out a bit. We studied the colors of this, because originally we thought of the facade as having the same color throughout, and just playing with textures and playing with gradients between precast and glass. But we were also listening to you about a glazed brick suggestion. And when we started looking at different colors for the base, the dark base just seemed to pop to us. It was like something that set off the top facade, allowing that whole angle running from about 9 feet down here to 13 feet up here. We wanted to keep that motion going, keep the facade opening up to the community. So we have the community room down here. We go from something that's really dense and opaque here to something that's light and open here right on the plaza. That was our idea. We really like the dark brick. We have samples there. We can talk about that in a moment. South facade, we had a cantilever. We decided that the cantilever was too costly. It was costly in terms of space, in terms of coordinating mechanical with the structural. That was really the issue. So we came up with a solution to incorporate legs or columns along the south facade to carry that cantilever. We have an elevation, a rendering in a minute here. The idea again is that we have glass in the very west end, and it transitions to metal louvers into the mechanical areas that all face the Long Island Railway and not the community. The facade is made up of these components. We have unitized construction on top, precast concrete with glass curtain wall. We've got vision panels with operable windows, shadow box top and bottom to give a vertical striation in that horizontal facade. Reveals in the concrete, we're looking at two different textures, an acid wash texture and a texture that's something that we can get from a form liner, something a little more rough. This is a couple of examples of textures. These are not the ordered samples for the project, but we will be working in that vein for the precast concrete facade. Here's an elevation of the west facade, main entrance to the precinct, with the signage integrated over the portal entrance. The brick lower base face. This would be a stack bond brick. This would be a thin brick incorporated into precast panels. So the entire building was going to be unitized construction, built off-site, panelized, brought to the site, and enclosed. Here's that southern facade with what I like to call as the parking concourse. Our columns integrated into the building. Plenty of parking here for the police. The facade comes down to the 9-foot point here, angles back up, and then is level all across the south facade facing along the railroad. Enclosures in the back for the compactor. It's a ground face concrete block. These pieces right here are the samples we're looking at right now. Something dark. We'd like to use brick on this, but it really needs to be kind of rugged. It's set away from the base, set away from the building itself, and a bit of a distance from the street. We don't think there'll be a big difference between the brick and the block, but we'd like it to match because it's a lower component on the site, rather keeping it separate from the upper precast concrete facade. The block also helps to hide some of the copper juice that will probably come out of the trucks as they come through. Canopy over the fueling station is simply there to organize the fire suppression system. It's not a huge canopy like you would see at a gas station to protect everybody, but it's mainly to organize that infrastructure. Landscape design, graphic design. So we have signage that's located at the precinct entrance, as well as the community room entrance, at the bench, and on this wall. Then we've got signage out here that helps mark the spot of the campus, if you will, with the flagpoles and the 116, but also it opens this up and creates a kind of a gateway, breaks apart from the precinct itself, and becomes a welcoming gesture to the community. Katie can, of course, answer some questions. I'm just going to quickly go over it. We have metal letters matching the metal on the facade here with the film on the glass. Receiving back from the film on the glass for the street addressing. There was a question about this being perhaps confused with the street address. Of course, out in Queens, all the addresses are hyphenated, so there is a bit of a difference. If you were looking for 116 on Fifth Avenue, then of course this would look like, the address on Fifth Avenue, but perhaps folks looking for this station relative to the street address are going to be looking for the 244-04, 244 meaning it's near 244th Street. That's the way the Queens addresses are set up. But we can talk further about that, and we can study that further if you still feel like there might be some confusion about the address. Sculptural 116, we thought of it as kind of a playful thing, turning slightly towards the precinct, narrowed out at the street entrance to the plaza. Of course, the address is here on the plinth that this is mounted on. There's benches here. We're going to get into landscaping in a moment. Community room, so named the community room is an offering to the community. It's a program element. Again, I'd like to see it named after somebody. That would be a great idea. And we have a bench outside the community room for overflow. People can sit on that, and this can also help direct people into the community room coming from in either direction, quite frankly, either the east or the west. The community room is very flexible. The way we see it, it could be presentations, could be group discussions, could be used like a library, could be used like a functional project room. So very flexible space, programming of which is continuing to be worked on with NYPD. The ceiling of the community room, there was some concern about that and how the ceiling looks from the outside. The idea is that from the west facade, things slope in towards the main desk, and this ceiling in the community room will be shared with the ceiling of the lobby in the precinct. There will be a separation, back up, this wall, a feature wall on both the lobby side, the other side, and on this side, separates the lobby from the community room. But the ceiling subtly slopes back, echoing the facade, if you will, as the facade slopes down to the east. We're going to separate the ceiling from the facade so that the ceiling can drop with what you could call a drapery pocket, if you will, kind of a typical detail. But the ceiling will slope while the facade continues to be straight. Lighting. Lighting has been a big issue relative to sort of control lights, but also site lighting. So we have site lighting on poles around the front and into the courtyard. These are marked with the red dots. And then we have parking lighting on the building. We're trying to minimize poles back here in the parking lot. We also have, this is photometrics, but lighting underneath at our parking concourse underneath the building there. Lighting on poles in front of the 105, where the new parking lot will be. Photometrics. And then the disorder control lights spaced around the building. Came up with a fixture that can be spaced at, it's 10 feet on center, 10 feet on center. Has it's a round fixture, it has a visor, a shade on the front to keep when it's on, and it will hardly ever be on. Hopefully they'll turn those lights on, but in the event of an emergency, they may come on, and we'll want to illuminate around the building. These lights will not be used for regular building illumination, they'll only be used for emergency. Here's the detail that we had come up with. There was some concern about this, and we're continuing to develop this detail. Originally, we were thinking that a parapet wall would come up, the fixture would be mounted to it, there would be an opening here that this could swing in, and NYPD's requirements to maintain these lights from the roof is something we've been working with. So there are a lot of issues here. There's the performance of the light, the structural integrity of how it's going to work, the issue of maintainability. We came up with an alternate detail that minimizes that construction. This is more like a screen wall that is attached to either the parapet or, depending on the height of this parapet wall, can also be attached to the walkway. The green lanterns at the front of the precinct where, excuse me, where you enter the precinct, the traditional green lanterns have been incorporated into the modern building facade. They are flush panels, LED panels. They can be tuned to any color of green you want. So the idea is that they'll not fade away, but they can be adjusted whenever they need to be adjusted. They're color LEDs. The flagpoles, of course, will be lit. And that leads us sort of into a landscape discussion. Hopefully we've got a couple of minutes to finish out here. Landscape is right at the end. This is what we presented before. We really haven't changed too dramatically from this partie. Again, public open space. We've got a blow up in the back. So the public open space is here. There are benches around it. We're going to go to a blow up in a minute. Things that we've added, I talked about a little bit earlier. We've got gates here and here. We've got a fence along the front. It's a 3-foot high concrete fence with a 3-foot high metal fence on top. Something from a security standpoint that NYPD wanted us to incorporate. And then bollards, of course, along the front here. And then that same fence then continues between the properties here all the way to the rear. There is a fence in back up against the easement. That's a Long Island Railroad chain link fence. We agreed not to touch it. It's theirs, and it is remaining. In terms of, this is what we showed before in terms of precedence and planting. Jeffrey, of course, could talk to some of these issues, but the idea really is to have tree plantings and ground cover. Those are the main two things. Easy to maintain for the police. Here's our public zone, the benches in this area to influence gathering. There's a blow-up of that. We're continuing to develop materials. We're looking at, I think we have the next slide. Here's the plantings. Pachysandra, Liriopede, and Carax, very simple, easy to maintain, ground cover. Trees such as the black tupelo be used across the front of the 105, and then the trees over here are the serviceberry across the north facade of the 116. Elevation of that, you can see the trees along the north facade here, and the bigger trees in front of the 105 annex. Gate details, rising bar gate here for the entrance to the parking lot. The bollards that we have proposed, that we're going to go away from precast sleeves to stainless steel, city standard, that's what we understand. And then our short barrier wall that will have metal fence this on top metal fence being deep blades so that they kind of close on themselves, and as you pass by, they open out. Visually, kind of a moire effect. Some of the components we're looking at, shapes of precast concrete pavers that will emulate some of the angles that are going on in the building. The bench, we have one bench that's multi-level, and will be, is designed currently like this, slatting it out of recycled plastic lumber. And that's the overview. Nighttime rendering will close on that. We can always go back to any of the slides.
Thank you. Would like to begin.
Well, I think that the project's come a long way in design, and I think that the ultimate massing and design and materiality, has a real civic presence. It's great. I just wanted to ask some specific questions about it. I know you've been working on some of the details. So one of them has to do, and I know because Manuel's on this, I want to talk about the graphics.
Okay.
And he had a concern about some of the kerning on one versus the other. I don't know if you got that at the community room, but also the 116 at the front. I mean, right here we see it. So, I mean, that's really a public plaza,
Yes.
right? So I was just wondering, does 116 need to be there as well as, or should it just be on the door? You've got multiple places where the signage is. And really, you're putting this big, if you go to the site plan, this 116, now this is more me speaking rather than him, right in front of the plaza here, right, which is really going to the train, right? So should it be more over to the left is a question. Questions, so I'll throw it out there. And here, so go back to the facade then too. So you were showing that you were, I guess it's so you were studying the green, the glowing of the green, right? And then with the graphics. And so I think it'd be probably helpful to study those things together, because I saw the green and then I didn't see the graphics together with it. And when you were studying the lighting, you weren't in these signs, in this elevation, right?
Okay. Well,
So this is how you will label the front of the building, correct?
right, so this provides the identity to the entrance, right?
But at night, the green glows,
Mhm.
and then how do I read the 116?
Well, in terms of, I suppose it could be illuminated.
Well, I'm not
In other words,
suggesting it be
this-
illuminated, just it would be
I think that's-
useful to see how it appears at night, because when you go to this detail up there, back there, I don't see the 116 from the exterior here with the glow. That's my only point. They're kind of disconnected in the presentation, that's all. Just disconnected in the presentation.
That's
So
good, you're
just
right.
to clarify that. And
I
then,
think it's a good point too, because, we should be studying this in the nighttime view.
yeah, great.
Does the 116 really read,
Yeah, because that's where, because I want to know that's the building, that's where I'm going, right?
So I have to imagine the community room's lights are not on 24 hours, unlike the precinct.
that's
I mean,
correct?
that'll probably close down at 11 or something.
I would assume so. I can't imagine them being, they could have, on a regular basis, probably, after 9 o'clock or something, it might not be lit. So the emphasis will be on the main entrance here.
So I think you should look at it both ways.
Right.
Mhm. Okay.
And then community, you had one image where, I think when you can name it is a great idea, right? To know, that's a great idea to name the community room. So you had one image where all of a sudden unity, it looks like you see,
There's a bit of a play on words,
Do you
right?
think that's a good idea? I'm kind of question mark.
Let's go back.
So,
Yes, John.
yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea.
Actually, I agree with you. I think that it doesn't read,
It doesn't read.
because the cat is like, it almost feels like catty corner and like shrunk in a font when you're opening it. But I think that the ones that are on the possible seating entrance, I think those are successful. But this, I think it's too repetitive and it's, I don't know how it's, I don't feel like it's necessary.
It would just be larger on the side.
Well, if there's another name coming in, I
Then-
think that's obviously the opportunity to.
Yeah, so you can see something to study here.
Yeah.
Can I just go back to the plaza? I mean, you've got two precincts there, the 105 and the 116. So I'm actually strongly against putting 116 in the plaza. Because, first of all, it's two precincts, and second of all, I'm not necessarily that interested in going into a public plaza that is branded by a police precinct.
You feel like it's too much like Police Plaza or something? Is that it?
Frankly. And, I mean, maybe there are reasons that the police are gonna maintain this, or that somehow or another, but look at the proximity to the 105. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that it becomes the 116 plaza.
Let's talk about that for 1 second. Philip, what's going to happen? Is something going to happen with the 105? Will always be,
I was late to that, Jeff. Well, one of the things is the existing 105 precinct annex will no longer be a 105 precinct annex. Currently in that building you have the annex personnel, but there are also other sort of borough-wide commands. So in a way that becomes even a more private building than it is now. So while it is like a larger NYPD complex in a way, the identity of this site is really about the 116 in a way, in terms of like something people would identify as an NYPD complex. People don't know crime scene and task force and all those kinds of things. We can see it both ways. I'm not sold on the idea that it has to be the 116 lettering there. I think it's something we can certainly look at, because the point is taken. It's a public plaza, so it's something we can certainly explore. I think there's something nice about a sculptural element there, and like super graphics as numbers makes sense, but it's something we can look at more further.
and the only other thing that I thought, we thought that the idea of having the 116 out here rather than back against the building or something, is that it was a way to create kind of a gateway into that plaza.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps I can understand your comment and concern about it, branding it. I mean, it's kind of a funny area. We're trying, well, the city's trying to provide a public plaza as part of community engagement, make people feel comfortable coming to this area in front of the police station, along on our railroad station, coming into the precinct. If that's something that we feel collectively is not appropriate, certainly we're going to study it some more. The idea was that we would organize the flags, which are kind of covering two bases with this kind of campus of buildings here, and that identity signage for the station, which has its entrance off of the public plaza and not off of the street, which were sort of compensating for that. By organizing that out there, we saw that as a bit of a gateway rather than a marker saying, this is our property, it is
I'm old, I'm old school. So if this is the, I appreciate what you're saying, and that there is a new attitude that is being promoted, and so I just expressing my opinion.
Okay, so we're going to study it further.
Yeah,
Katie?
sorry, and just one last point about, one of the major reasons we suggested this on the street is because the traffic is coming in this direction, and because the entrance is back here, we were concerned that unless we had the 116 up here, because people may be looking for two different things. They may be looking for the address, but they also may be looking for the 116. So our recommendation to put it up here was because the entrance is back here, and considering the path of travel from the traffic.
So, can I ask a question about the interaction with the Long Island Railroad entrance? Aren't a lot of people
Going to the train. Isn't it,
Well, I'm just curious if you've studied that aspect.
Well, I would say that in my experience, which we do a lot of transit work, we would have, we would do perhaps pedestrian modeling, we'd have a traffic engineer that would calculate all of this, and we'd have numbers on ridership using that. But because we're on the city side, we're not on the MTA side, we don't have the ridership numbers of people who are using this. It's almost hidden now. It's kind of odd. It's almost hidden.
Yeah.
go back to the context because if you look at the,
I feel like you have this really new, beautiful building, and it's a shame to not have a local presence.
I mean, there is there,
I understand.
right?
I really appreciate the public plaza aspect.
Can you go back to that rendering next, sorry?
The rendering.
One second.
Yeah.
This is it now, which is a parking lot. You know, you have to wind your way through there and hope that somebody doesn't come out and say, what are you doing on NYPD property?
But that's where the plaza is going to be,
The plaza is going to, is,
right there.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
essentially,
So you're
this
fixing
is
it.
244.
No, you're fixing it.
It's, I mean, it's wonderful
Yes.
having a
So
plaza.
Yeah, no,
go
it's
to
a-
the rendering now.
It's like an opportunity. If this were a development project, we'd be looking for more height or something, right? Giving public access to something like this. But this is really an
Go to
opportunity.
the rendering.
Go to the rendering, I guess.
Go to the rendering.
What
Well,
was sort of like?
the comment is about just really, so, I mean, the building is great, it does have a civic presence, but you're also providing such an amazing amenity with the public space. But it's not just about going to the precinct, it's also about taking the train. And if we're going to, we're talking about community identity, even naming the community room, there seems to be other opportunities to elevate the role of this plaza to serve all these different uses, including transit, even the people who work in the building, if there's going to be other boroughs represented in the building adjacent. That's what I'm.
More so than like that 116.
Yeah, so
stuff.
it's not about 116, and I think even the idea that the entrance is sort of hidden is an opportunity to maybe not make the entrance so hidden, or show that there's a way to catch the train from this side of the track.
Also, you made the point, I think, at the beginning of the presentation, that from the building or someplace, you said you look to the view toward the Long Island Railroad. Well, it isn't a question only of seeing it out there, but people may be walking through and getting there. And that is a public plaza, so all of these comments of facilitating this, I think are very worthwhile. I mean, you're engaging in something very admirable. The NYPD putting this building in a public plaza, and there's often ambiguities of what's a public plaza. But you're doing something with a good aim and goal, and don't hamstring yourself to be good. I mean, remember, police stations have been on sidewalks, on streets, and those are public. Okay, now you're putting it in a public plaza with another facility there, and people can walk through. And yeah, you may be worried about security in another way, but you really should try to do, I must say, what my colleagues have suggested, because it's a great thing, and it is an amenity that's important, I think.
So I know you have to hurry out from time, and also that piece could be studied in terms of its height. I don't know if it's a second line of defense that
It's
in
not,
this rendering,
no.
the person looks to be sitting, but they're kind of missing the seat. It would be great if they could actually sit.
Sure.
And then I just want to get to the lights, because I know that was a lot of discussion. And I appreciate your detail. Maybe we should go look at that detail, what pages are on there. So the alternate with the screen wall seems like a good idea, obviously, because it seems such, save some money there, because it's going to be expensive. So that seems simpler. I like the screen wall. I'm wondering about whether it should be dark up there, because during the day, I'm just, you're matching this to this, it's way up there, and I think when it's against the sky even at night,
Well,
I'm wondering if it should be a gray that's in between those two.
yeah, in between.
All right, that's
Yeah.
all. But I think the screen, the next one down is the better detail, right?
Yeah.
That's the better detail. Isn't that the revised detail?
Yes.
Yes. Great.
Simpler.
Simpler. Lighter in all kinds of ways.
Lighter in
One
color.
thing, and it'll be back, and it'll be a screen, yeah, great,
Okay, let's look at that.
great, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
My name is Alicia West, and I'm the Director of Public Design Outreach at DEP, and also proud PVC staff. So I'm pleased to be here today to share with you guys conceptual designs for our new digester facilities at our Hunts Point wastewater treatment plant. I'm joined by Matt Fiderici and because, you know, we come with all sorts of weird things like digesters, and everyone is like, what is that? So basically, when you flush the toilet or run your faucet, it goes down the drain and enters the sewer, and that winds up at one of the city's 14 wastewater treatment plants. And so at that plant, the treatment process essentially is separating water from the solids. So the water is disinfected, and then it's released into a local waterway. The solids are then further processed to remove excess water and any harmful bacteria. And the end product is what we call biosolids, or more affectionately cake, because it kind of looks a little bit like devil's food cake. And the digesters that we're going to talk about today are a critical component in that process. So this project's really going to be great because it's going to generate a higher quality of biosolid that can be beneficially reused instead of just landfilled. And it's also going to be, by reducing the volume of that biosolid, we're going to be able to limit the number of truck trips out of the neighborhood, which is a really big deal generally, but also really important to this community where there's a really high hazard rate. Okay. All right. So our wastewater treatment plant is in the Hunts Point neighborhood in the southeast Bronx, and is one of our largest plants. It accepts wastewater from 16,000 acres in the eastern Bronx. So the current facility is here in the blue dotted line. Our project site is here in the solid blue line. And we've acquired that site, and we're also going to be transferring a portion of our property, which is in the red dotted line there, to the Parks Department to be developed as an extension of Barretto Point Park. So the current, oops, sorry. So we are in a primarily industrial manufacturing district, but as I mentioned, we are right next to Barretto Point Park, and so we've been very cognizant of that context as we approach our design. The Commission previously reviewed OEM's flood protection plans for the Hunts Point treatment plant, and you can see that the site for the digesters is actually largely outside of the flood zone, but the facility is going to be designed to meet DEP's requirements so that all critical equipment is elevated above the 100-year floodplain plus 32 inches to account for sea level rise. Okay, so this is an aerial to kind of orient you. This is our existing plant here. This is the site that we're talking about today. This is the manufacturing district, and then here's the park. You can also see called out here are our existing digester tanks, which will be demolished once our new facility is completed. So here are some photos of our site. It's going to be cleared completely. This is an image looking towards our site, so from inside the park. This is an image taken from sort of center of our site looking south towards the water. This image shows our existing plant. These are the thickening tanks, which are also a part of the solids processing. And you can also see our perimeter fence, which you'll see later we're replicating, and also some street trees. And this is a photo from our site looking northwest. This is some of the manufacturing there. This is our existing site plan. So again, our site in red here, and now parcels turned blue. I also want to point out that Barretto Street and Riowa Avenue here in gray, those areas have been demapped. So here's our proposed site plan. We have 4 circular digester tanks, and then nestled in the center we have our support structures. The northern portion of our site is kind of going to be developed for the time being as sort of a central green dell. It's going to have some subtle grading and grass planting to manage the stormwater runoff, but ultimately that area may be used for additional processing facilities. We do hope to be able to accept food waste for compost. We do have a pilot program at our Newtown Creek plant to accept that, and that's fed into the digesters. So we hope to ultimately be able to do that here, and that will require additional facilities. So the existing digesters down here are pancake style, and again, we need to keep those operational until our new digesters are complete. Our proposed digesters are silo style, so they have a smaller footprint, but they are taller structures. These are going to be large structures, and there's really not going to be any hiding them. So we've worked really hard to develop an approach to create an attractive design so that they really function as an interesting focal point in the cityscape. And we're also providing a landscape buffer, you can see here and on Ely Avenue, to try to soften those edges as they leave the park and as people may approach the park. And I'll have more on that towards the end of the presentation. So we developed some shadow studies to understand the impact on the park. Our largest shadow impacts will be in the wintertime when park usage is lowest. Okay, so this is our upper roof plan, which is a good starting point to understand the different components of what this facility will be. We have our 4 circular digesters. They're connected by a rooftop catwalk. And then nestled amongst them, we have our control building and gas room, which are both 1-story structures. And then we also have to the south our waste gas burners. So methane is a byproduct of the wastewater treatment process, of the solids process. And we do reuse that methane to power the boilers in our plant, but we need to be able to burn, to flare the excess gas because it's greenhouse gas, it cannot just be released into the atmosphere. All right, so here is our plan at grade level. And then this is the gallery level. So this is the equipment gallery where we have all of our piping and pumps and solids processing equipment. This is a largely underground space, but it does crop up slightly, and then those 1-story buildings are on top of it. And we also have, which I neglected to mention earlier, we do have 2 stair towers to bring folks up to the top to this catwalks. Okay, so this section gives you a sense of scale. These tanks will be roughly 94 feet tall. It also shows you what's below grade and what's above grade. So again, here's the grade. So the gallery space is mostly below grade, but does pop up a little bit, and then we've got our 1-story support structures above it. You can also see that the tanks themselves are cylindrical, but we're introducing a slightly funnel-shaped cladding, which will lend those tanks a little bit more of an interesting profile, but also serve to cover up certain appurtenances on the tanks, such as these overflow boxes and piping, so that we can create a really clean and consistent skin on these digesters. So the cladding we're looking at is called Alucobond, which is lightweight but durable, customizable aluminum panel. We're looking at a silver matte finish to cut down on any glare. We're proposing a blue glazed brick for our support buildings. And we're also looking at solar tubes for the rooftop there to provide an efficient means of natural light inside. And then for this, for the gallery building where it pops up above ground, we're looking at a nice architectural concrete form liner there. So the stair towers are lozenge-shaped in plan. And they're going to be clad in gray brick with vertical accent tinted glass. The arched catwalks at the top are enclosed in a perforated metal mesh. So the digester facility itself will be enclosed, as I said, in a picket, black aluminum picket fence to match what we have at the adjacent facility. So here's an image of the Alucobond panel that we're looking into. And here are some other images of the materials that I mentioned. So the form liner for the gallery building, the perforated metal panel for the catwalk, blue glazed brick for our support buildings, gray brick for the stair tower with the tempered tinted glass for that vertical accent window, and then the solar tubes. There's an image of the bollards in here. We will, because, going back to this section, here. So you can see this is the north elevation, so the park is on the right side, and then this is Manita Street, which is a really heavily industrial street. And we have a lot of very, very large trucks doing 3-point turns to access the businesses on that block. They have done a real number on the fence that's there now. So we feel that once we put our new fence in, we need to be providing some level of protection to that fence from those trucks. And that's also why we haven't proposed street trees on that street, because we don't want to be in the position of putting an investment like that out there, knowing that they're either really not going to thrive or maybe not survive at all. Okay. So is our south elevation and our west elevation. So I have some renderings, which will be from the point of view of the park and then also from Beeley Avenue, which is the northern facade. And like I said, these are big structures, and they're definitely going to be seen. We have a lot of facilities in the city. As I said, we have 14 wastewater treatment plants. Some are in far removed places, others are in places that you can kind of get right up next to. This is one of those. And like our plant in Greenpoint, the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant, we know we can't hide these things, and so we wanted to make them an attractive focal point in the landscape, in the cityscape. So this is looking from Beeley Avenue, which runs north along our site, looking southwest, and then again from a little bit closer in the park, looking southeast. So as I said, we have a planted buffer that's going to run along the park side and the northern edge of the site. We're looking at trees that have some visual interest, whether that's flowering or nice autumn colors. We're also looking at a variety of shrubs and also bioswale species so that we can be sure to capture all of our site water runoff. So that is my presentation, and we were fortunate enough to get some comments from you all in advance, and I understand that we should be talking a little bit more about our stair towers, which we are happy to do. We've done some preliminary research into some of your suggestions. I don't know if you want to just sort of speak to that and then respond, or how you guys want to do it, or if you want me to take it back to a certain slide.
Yes, I have some remaining comments.
Yeah.
So, I think I really we should celebrate our infrastructure, and that it's important that it also, you said well, you called it an interesting focal point in the landscape. I must be more than an interesting focal point. It's going to be major, right? But yeah, so be it. So just taking it on for a minute, I want to talk about, can we go back to the thing itself?
Want an elevation or an
There you go. Okay, so there's this insistence on a bilateral symmetry here. I'm kind of aghast at it because it seems very bombastic, in elevation, because you're setting up the stair tower as this kind of central piece, as if it's, the Great Salt Works or something that we do. If we can celebrate that there are people in there sometimes going up, and I mentioned that we got some comments, could we not, and I appreciate that the workers need to be protect from inclement weather. Can it be a lighter stair tower? Does that be glass? Could it be more transparent? Carpet can just be lighter and not heavy concrete with the green stripe. It doesn't tell me anything about who's in there. And does it have to be bilaterally symmetrical? Is there something about, because the bridge piece that you're walking across is a box, is a truss anyway. It's a vireo or it's a box or something, I guess. So it's spanning. I don't think that big stair tower is necessary to hold a little bridge.
Yeah.
So can it be lighter? Can it be more of a composition? I'd love that to be studied.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we started looking, there's a lot of
The elevator, you're saying, the back.
yeah,
and
so
all that.
one of
So,
the
yeah.
more recent additions is that and rightly so, the staff who's going to work here has requested an elevator, so I don't have to climb all of those stairs all the time. We do need to have stairs as emergency egress, obviously. But yes, we can absolutely look at making those stair towers more transparent. Polycarbonate is a great idea. We'll absolutely look into that.
So if this elevator is on the interior, that's a great idea, and because stair towers give scale to something, they help you understand the scale of the body in relationship to, this big thing. And then the Lucabond, is that, you're showing it pillowing. Is it going to pillow?
I think,
We don't want it to pillow, right?
it's got a,
We never want that to happen.
Right.
So it's going to be,
I think they're rounded, so it may be the drawing showing a little bit of the radiating and how
it just appears to be pillowing in the render to some, for oil canning, whatever term you want to use it, you never want with a Lucabond, right? You want it to be really flat.
Yeah. So we'll work to make sure that's the case.
My only question about signage is nice to see.
Hi.
Sorry.
can be disorienting for buildings like this, especially if it being such close proximity to a park. And it will be possibly a daunting structure for some. So how is that going to be kind of made a little bit more clear?
So I'm a big advocate for obviously explaining what on earth we do at DEP. It's really complicated, and I think a lot of people just kind of take for granted that when they flush the toilet, like they don't ever have to think about it again, but there's a tremendous amount of money and energy that goes into processing that wastewater and making sure that our harbors and waterways stay clean as a result. And I feel that, and the agency feels that it's something to be really proud of. It's why we do what we do every day. So we do have a really wonderful educational program that's actually run out of my Bureau of Public Affairs and Communications that we take all kinds of school groups from little kids to PhD students to Newtown Creek for tours so that they can understand the process here. I do think that we do have an opportunity to be providing some educational information here, and we can certainly look into that.
So that was in response to signage, right?
Yes.
So that would be at some
I think, yeah, I mean, I think potentially I think we're sort of, we've met up several times with the community board. Community board 2 here has a very local presence about this plant in the past. I mean, usually their quality of life issues for sure. They've seen this plan. Their biggest concern was about the perimeter edge, and they really wanted to make sure that we were softening that fence as much as possible. So we are trying to plant it a lot. To try to make it disappear a little bit, and we'd have to figure out, is that an appropriate place to have educational signage, or is it going to get lost in there? And so maybe there's something else that we can pick up, but we'll definitely.
Is there a percent for our connection?
We're not doing percent for our connection.
No? Why not?
DEP does not typically do percent for art projects, which has something to do with the way that the law is written, right here, which is about accessible civic spaces. We don't have a lot of those, right? We do have 2 really nice percent for art projects at our Newtown Creek plant, which is the plant that is open to the public, and we, in a controlled manner. Like I said, we do all those tours there, and we also have it's called the Waterfront Nature Walk, which is a George Tracus piece, and that allows access to the Newtown Creek waterfront there. So we have, where there was an opportunity that made sense, the agency did it there, but in many of our projects, they're not accessible spaces, so providing a work of art is really appropriate.
I was just thinking that something on that stairwell would be nice. Even just to go.
Just redesign something, yeah.
I wouldn't call them digesters, it reminds me of Soil and Green.
But they're digesting still, that's what they're doing. They're 98.6 degrees,
Wow.
that's what they're doing.
Just, I don't know, still scary. It's great, I think it's beautiful, actually, and I think it looks great from the park. I agree with Hank, no question. People will be definitely interested in what it is. And they need to know what it is. It's great.
Lighting is another
Yeah.
impact on it.
Yeah, particularly in
I
the park.
think we have ladies houses in that project, right? Yes.
Well, you would show it at night.
Yeah, we'd like to see it.
Especially
Yeah, we'd like to
because
see
the
it.
park is there, right? The park, they have a lot of
Or
dust and
dust.
evening.
Yeah, sure, they'll
Or
be used, yeah.
thinking about that. Contribution.
We can definitely look at incorporating this in the first. I mean, I think that they were sort of looking for a little bit more of a showy palette. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but in the winter, you guys
Yeah.
have a sequoia or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's very high up.
Yeah. I think we tend to, sort of a knee-jerk reaction is to do a big row of evergreens if we can't see it, and so we tend to shy away from that approach because but yes, we can actually look at incorporating this.
And what will happen where you take down the other digesters? Do you know?
So I think ultimately what has to happen is, as I said, there's sort of a suite of processes that go into the solids handling. Back to an earlier plant, there we are. So these guys are the thickening tanks and the gas handling tanks. buildings. And ultimately, those will also need to be reconstructed, so that working all together, we can ensure that we can continue to provide this high-quality biosolid. So that's going to be the next project that you'll see at this point.
And the waste can't be taken away by barge, it has to go by truck somewhere?
So we do move things around along the water. Typically, we're bringing things by barge to this facility, right? We have what's called a dewatering facility here. We don't have them at all of our plants, and so that's the last step in the process. And it sounds like it's bringing that last bit of water out of the solids. And that's over here. So we do move things around, but I do believe that currently everything goes out by truck right now.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
For Esplanade, the Festival City and the Lake Society Ecology Center, Pier 42 is the site of a former newsprint warehouse. Phase 1A, which is the abatement and demolition of the warehouse in the pier, is currently under construction. We're here for your preliminary review of Phase 1B, which is the overall park, including lowland gardens, a viewing plaza and picnic lawn, the picnic knoll, a comfort station, and playground. Eureka Maeda from Matthews Nielsen and Peter Kuhn from Sage & Kuhn will make the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for having us today. We're going to present our Pier 42 Phase 1B. We have 57 pages for limited time of presentation time. So I would like to go quickly through except major design elements and also a change we made since our last submission, as well as comments we received up to this presentation. So Pier 42 is located lower east side of Manhattan. Since we submitted last presentation, there is some changes to our neighborhood. One is a common air vent structure, newly constructed with a perforated metal, and also right now under construction, the new city fast ferry, polyester building. There is also lower east side ecology center. They are proposing construction of wetland and also new compost facility. Gail mentioned that Pier 42 originally built as a new newsprint terminal. Actually, that history inspired us the imagery of compost station. We will show you later. As you know, Pier 42 is an AE zone, meaning the 100-year flood area. So during the Hurricane Sandy, our project study in 2012, the site was completely inundated. So designed to accommodate those resiliency, and also there are a lot of utilities underneath of Pier 42. As you can see, sewer running through the site, and also two CSO openings, as well as ComEd or static line, and also from the new vent structure to the 200 feet ComEd shaft connected with underground tunnel, and actually from 200 feet deep shaft, another tunnel goes to Brooklyn. So that's sort of causing a lot of design challenge for Pier 42. Not only the planting, but also topography. Pier 42, as Gary mentioned, there is a two part of the project. Phase 1A is the demolition and abatement of the pier shed, and right now under construction. And as you can see right side, just the roofing came out from the shed. And also Pier 42 entrance, we shared with Basketball City, also DOT maintenance yard. And DOT maintenance yard will remain at this location. The year goes by, there are a lot of new residential, 8-story high in the lower east side, static constructed. And this is a new ComEd vent structure. It's a perforated in the evening, some light from the inside. first ferry under construction all the way edge of the pier, our project edge. That changed some programming for our design. This is the Lower East Side Ecology Center. They are constructing wetland at this location. So this is the master plan we presented in 2013. I'd like you to just focus on playground location and restroom comfort station location and also plaza. When we presented phase 1 back in 2014, we did not have comfort station and playground. However, we moved plaza to the entrance area because DOT will remain at this location. So I'd like to spend a little bit the reasoning of citing comfort station and playground different from our master plan. As you recall, comfort station was located close to the decking and playground was located in the entry area. And comfort station we have to move from south to north because of the decking condition. The phase 1A, after we remove shed from the decking, the site will be fenced off and no access allowed. Because of the unsafe condition of the decking, decking won't be open to public. Because of the situation, we could not rehabilitate decking. Decking elevation is about 9 to 10. And comfort station, since it's a float zone, we have to put all of the mechanical equipment over 100-year float plate, which means that we are putting above 12.5. So when we fuel underneath comfort station, we cannot put fuel against the chimney press. That was one of the reasons that we could not locate comfort station adjacent decking. And also playground location is always comes with sort of as close as comfort station, with a 1-minute walk or 250 feet away. So since we moved our plaza to the entry, this location, proposed location has to be for the playground because of all UTP restrictive siding of the playground. So this is overall our new phase 1B layout. I'd like to go over segments by segments, so I'm going to skip through it. So Pier 42, pretty much open. There is no fence surrounding. Only fence is surrounding is a playground in the middle, and those are changing fence separated from adjacent. This is a proposed park. As I mentioned, Pier 42 is a floodplain. So as you can see, this kind of lime green, yellow color is an existing elevation. And our proposed elevation is above 100-year floodplain. Some pockets that we created are below the lowland because of capturing stormwater on site. So this is the diagram shows the impervious reduction from this existing condition to proposed condition. We are reducing about 48% of impervious surface. So this is one thing that I'd like to spend a little time. What is we are trying to show here in this diagram. As you know, East Coastal Resiliency Project, as known as ESCRA, Pier 42 located southern end of their project. And there are several components, design components that we need to consider. We need specific coordination needed with this project, especially that's associated with schedule. So Pier 42 will start construction early 2019 and about 2 years of construction. After we completed open, ESCRA is still under construction. And by the time they come to the Pier 42 area, it's park is completely open, and there is so many issues that we cannot them to come in after we open our park. So one is that, as you saw, a lot of utility line goes through the park. There are manholes, numerous manholes in the park. Because of installation of flood wall, they have to make the manhole to be waterproof. So those are all manholes that they have to do waterproof. However, they cannot come in later after we open the park to do waterproof. Number one is a manhole is as you remember, we created a program. So we have to raise a manhole, and at the same time, we have to waterproof. All of the trees and everything will be disturbed by it. So we coordinated with SRT. Right now, agency is working coordination with other DEC in terms of funding. So the lower part is another schedule associated with express project. We need a clear separation between Pier 42 Park and extra construction disturbance zone. Because, okay. So we created a wall to separate both projects. So I'm going to go very quickly for each section. So we divided 4 sections of Pier 42 design. Entry plaza with distinctive pavement and also over 100 linear foot of seating with tree canopies creating some shade. After the comfort station, we have ADA accessible route and wider 12 feet wide path is used to much east side of the park. As you can see, the section how the comfort station will be up in the doorway. This is a view of the entry plaza. Content border, so it signifies entry of the plaza and the top entry. And those borders are located maximum 4 feet apart because of any accidental vehicle coming into the park. The dimension was divided by 7 feet. So this is view looking back from the station from major paths. And today playground we brought as a conceptual. However, we have a theme of playground at the shoreline from low shoreline to rocky shoreline, both natural and industrial. Age group play area being separated. However, mixed age group is conveniently located in the middle. When you enter the park, both sides, one side close to the comfort station is a water play. And we are proposing to give this adorable, very popular feel, give people a new home. We are going to work with Parks and Department closely, the feasibility of removing it, and also its time. So this is a major circulation of the playground and access for route coming up from the major access. This is an inclusive play, which is an ADA handicapped play feature. I mentioned only fence in this park is a playground. 4 feet high perimeter fence. Around the swing is 3 feet high. And 17-inch pipe rail around the front in the playground. So we move to the next section. Third section is we call Lowland Gardens. This is the lowest elevation entering the park to capture storm water. Although this area is a sort of viewing park, we strategically located higher spot to create great view. Only this area has a clear unobstructed view to the river. And the location, one of the questions of this site, would you like to provide space for visitor to do some activities, especially best spot for Tai Chi to get direct airflow from the river. This section shows both water capturing area, and this image shows people trying to catching up before the dusk for the jogging, strolling of the Loras Garden area. You can see common structure just started growing. And then last, the picnic floor area, we did not change except the entrance from new ferry landing. We kind of created a welcome border to business to come in to the road area. This is a section shows kayak point at the Loran Gardens, and also this is a picnic floor about 7 feet high from the existing track. This is the one thing that track materials, because of the utilities, those red rotations are prohibited to have trees. This is required by DEP to show this the access point. The lower side is a resiliency for how track materials can be sold tolerant, salt tolerant species, especially by seashore. Cabinetry, texture, color, forms, variety. However, we consider high salt tolerance. Shrubs play great role for people because of the limited location of the planting trees. Shrubs are creating screening, buffering from adjacent paths. So we have large, medium, low. And perennials also we show the high salt tolerance, so as well as grasses and ground covers. The grasses mix, we are working with professor at Butler University for many conditions such as foot traffic, shade tolerance, mixed with flowers. We change the mixes to apply specific purpose. For your interest of plant materials, and this is the color and materials we selected for people to project. The concrete, pigmented asphalt, concrete with exposed aggregate, and asphalt block expert. Asphalt is very one question from commissioners about light color aggregate, and we contacted DOT. DOT once they tried to introduce light color aggregate. However, because of its cost, also feasibility to mix light color aggregate in a facility using dark color aggregate, it was very difficult for them to be really installed. So at this point, for the maintainability for Parks Department, we regular asphalt. The color scheme, phase 1A, the main shed structure will be painted red. And the comfort station, there is another came up at the comments. And we mentioned we are using indigo color, and whether you can make it lighter. And it's a big mistake for our part. We thought that indigo color was needed for all comfort station aside grade. However, cobalt, this color, is actually was used, picture we showed, very, not much different, but actually lighter and getting the actual sun, direct sun from the south create a lot of light color. So one thing that dark color is a preferred color by Parks Department because of graphic conditions. So this dark So we presented some people allowing us to bring a new one. Okay. So we will just talk.
Just to interject one thing. So this is the new Sun 2 comfort stations. This is being currently installed at Solomon Farms. Sorry.
So we will discuss with Parks Parks Department working with issues.
We don't care.
Which will?
Either of them.
No, I think the lighter is great.
It's not that weird, light just looks like it doesn't belong to this fire.
It looks great.
Okay, deal.
Good deal.
So that means my presentation's over?
Okay.
I hope so.
Well, the screen, right?
Yes, that's right.
So one thing that we would like to mention that pathway forms, we were inspired by the flow of water. Because of this park is such a linear fashion, we looked at how rivers run through their beds and creating some spots, the stone deposited where the flow of the water tributaries. So those boulders will be located in certain locations to show unifying of the entire park as well as identity of each area. Standard materials for park. Only thing that last week community board requested to use to solve this very, so we are considering right now. This is a great appreciation to DOT and also Parks Department to push forward this new solar lighting in the park. This will be first new.
Success, just throw that out there. So we're very, very excited for this. Very, very
This is
excited.
first New York City Parks Department park to have solar lighting. The Pier 42 is the best location to do that because of the floodplain as well as complete south facing. This is the preliminary layout of solar lighting. Sorry. So comfort station. So imagery was, we studied 3 different imagery, including marlberry, poplar, and papaya. All of this is a source of paper coming from the municipal terminal, and papyrus was the Parks Department paper option. And all exterior composition shows what exterior is looking like for the comfort station. So comfort station is a Parks Department standard, adding some office space to that comfort station. In order to avoid having 4 doors one side, we created a side door for only office space. That's actually closer to a parking lot for Parks Department, made it available to park. We are looking at the soil, tile decks right now, depend on the soil formation. This is a front entry elevation look, and as you can see, this elevation has office entry. So we'd like to end with this planting typology. We believe that with trees and shrubs, all of the texture, color, forms will navigate the narrative of park, linear form of park. And agencies and design team working very hard to provide access to this unique yet open green space to the local neighborhood to improve their environment, also equity. Thank you so much.
So I guess there were some comments about the screen. I mean, I think it's, can't wait till it's built, it's fantastic. Maybe we can get back to, you said there's going to be this wall, or Justin was trying to get you to hurry up, but there is a wall where you're separating the scope of work, and I didn't know, is that permanent or temporary, or how that?
Between the escrow project.
Yes.
So the wall will be a permanent.
Permanent.
For Aspen.
Yeah.
So we are building permanent
Do we
walls.
see it in any of your sections?
Yes.
And not to the paper, I don't see it.
So those are walls separating
Oh, that's the wall there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I can speak, in some places, sorry, I'm Terry Garner from PC, when we're meeting grade, it'll be a flush curve, and where we need to raise up, for example, adjacent to the comfort station, to accommodate a higher grade, it will be somewhat of a wall, but not a high wall, it'll just be, you know, I don't know,
18 inches.
18 inches.
No, it seems great. I mean, we've seen some big walls. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Paying
Yeah,
attention.
it's better in this park. It's,
Yes,
the
this is
natural
what
grade
this
is.
is. Yes,
So
yes.
this 18 inches wall could be 6 inches wall because Iskra has to regrade the laser floor for their drainage purpose. So we have 18 inches.
Okay, seems great. And this is okay, so we should probably go to the comfort station, right? We were back there on the screen, because that was one of the
The
questions.
screens, yes. So brick color, clear, screen.
Yeah, so I think the lighter, as you said, is great, and you had some screen options?
Well, we tested 3 different species, tree species against papyruses on a tree. Parks Department thought the story about papyrus was the most compelling. Usually what we do with the screen after we set on a plant type is we make studies that are full scale. Oftentimes we've sent them down here for your review, and we certainly could do that. And this is kind of a schematic design.
Right. I mean, I think the mulberry looks great. I mean, the mulberry one, but I'm the only one looking at it, just because it has more, you can see it more. So just whether there's, my only question, because I love the idea of the screen and the political brick and everything, and the design of the conversation altogether, it's just a question of what are we communicating? Can you see that it actually is
Right, I think
vegetation?
what-
And the papyrus is just hard to understand what it is, that's all.
So I think the bottom line for us is making a connection between the history of the site and what's on the screen, whether it's mulberry or papyrus.
Right.
I'm not going to lose any sleep if we change it, but I'm also willing to say that our office is willing to study this until it, works without delaying the regular schedule.
Okay, I think that's great.
We'll take a look at that.
Great,
Sure.
great. And the red, because it's different, it obviously always appears different when you project the red, and I think the red is really important that it doesn't get, I don't know who's picking the red, but we should know what red it is.
So this red is the actual custom car. And it's called Redstone for the Benjamin Moore.
And this is the actual red, because that's what you want to see if that is.
And that's a sort of Chinese red car. That's where we chose this car.
So that was in a previous project that the design commission approved, right?
Right.
Previous project.
Like which one?
The phase 1A,
The phase
final
1A.
submission.
The red.
Yeah, yes, this is all right.
There was a lot of discussion, and that's where.
That's correct.
Okay.
So on the asphalt, so we're gonna just keep pushing and pushing this till, we turn blue in the face.
The color blue.
Cobalt. The idea here, right, this is effectively a resilient landscape, and so there are big issues that we're trying to address, and we really want to find a way to push for, this lighter asphalt and something that the city can maintain. So, we just need to kind of bring that conversation maybe offline and really find where and what project it makes sense. Hopefully it could be something that's happening sooner than later. But we do want to better understand the constraints and how this is happening, because it is important. We're doing all these backflips over resilient landscapes, and then we're paving it in black asphalt. It doesn't make sense.
So in this project, the big paved areas are not asphalt, right? They're a light color.
Yeah, we are showing that, Stacy with MMLA, we're showing them as, the main pathways as concrete right now to have that higher SRI, and that it's just the smaller pathways that we were showing as an asphalt.
Right.
Concrete's not more resilient than.
It's lighter, so
It's lighter.
It's lighter,
less
right.
united.
It's lighter, yes.
So we'll keep pushing, but otherwise, great.
I just have one, maybe last comment, but, you said in the beginning that you made an accommodation to the newly created Lower East Side Ferry. And maybe we could look at the plan. And I guess I wonder, whether that accommodation is in fact really adequate as a means of egress and access. Let's go back to that one you just had. And one of the things that is slightly useful function of the Public Design Commission is that we see these things in the context of multi-agency activities. And there seems to be a sort of grudging here acceptance of the Lower East Side Ferry as opposed to a more welcoming. Are large numbers of people coming on and off that ferry really perfectly accommodated to walk through the park day and night? It doesn't, maybe I'm just me, but it just doesn't seem as though it's generous and accepting. It seems as though it's, yeah, okay, there's going to be a ferry here and we'll make a small apron to accommodate some more people. But how do you see the location of the Lower East Side Ferry from the community? How do you get there? Are you comfortable getting there? You don't see it because there's no direct line of sight to it. I would think about maybe, we had this issue in our last presentation when things need to serve multiple goals. I think everybody has to sort of chip in and try to do that. So if everyone's happy that this is perfect, then I'll shut up. But it doesn't strike me as obviously perfect. It strikes me as constrained and difficult to see, difficult to move to, difficult to move away from. So maybe someone could look at that.
Yeah, we looked at the situation with the park relative to ferry, new ferry landing.
Right. But that's an issue of, let's look at it from the park's perspective. Are we saturating the park with people leaving? I'm saying, can't we, since we're here as the city of New York, can't we look at it from, are we giving the people who are riding the ferry the best possible way of moving through this brand new, fairly expensive park, both as a delight and as a reasonable access? Again, I could be wrong. It doesn't, you walk off, there are giant boulders right in front of you. I don't know, it doesn't, maybe no one will ride the ferry, but our mayor seems to suggest otherwise and is investing a gigantic amount of money in that, so.
One thing that we added those boulders at the end of the pathway was when people are waiting ferries, there are landings they can wait. But maybe if they want to wait more, maybe they sit by the park on the border area to wait, have some view.
I would just second that comment because I think it would be great to study it in terms of what's outside of your park and how the people are arriving, where they're arriving from. Is there a street right across? And that they're directed, because that ferry's been far more successful than anything imagined.
Yeah.
So it's, they're now tripling the amount of boats. It's very exciting.
We did approve signage as part of the ferry-wide service, and we can go back and look at what we approved for the upland for this site, and then the team can kind of further study that with EDC and looking at access.
I mean, I don't think it has to be a straight line, but.
Yeah, no, but it's, well, just to
Help us understand,
see
when they're walking, what's the
Right.
experience.
Yeah,
That's what we're
right.
first.
I like the fact that you can connect to the other seemingly shorter exit by walking along the water. I think that's cool. That seemed to me to be a more successful response. Yes, exactly. Than the other one, which struck me as, again, I just think it ought to be looked at. I mean, you guys know that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda. Items 26579, 26628, and 26630. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by the various committees and the recusals. Staff has noted Commissioner Morgenthau's recusal from 26628, Commissioner Nielsen's recusal from 26583, and Commissioner Shepard's recusal from 26606, 266-110, 266-14, and 266-15. Are there any recusals that are not noted? No? Let the record show there are no other recusals. For the record, no members of the public have signed up to testify on any of the consent items. Does anyone wish to testify on any of these projects? No, let the record show that no one wishes to testify. Will someone make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the condition of approvals noted? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hands. Let the record show, all in favor, the consent agenda is approved with the conditions noted. We now move to the public hearing and item 26629, a prototypical newsstand at the southwest corner of Broadway and West 62nd Street, Manhattan. For standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask any questions, deliberate, and vote.
May I proceed? Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Executive Director. My name is Max Bookman. I'm an attorney. I represent Newsstands. With me is Nishat Sheikh. She is the applicant for the newsstand that's before you today, which is on the southwest corner of Broadway and West 62nd Street. Very briefly about Ms. Sheikh before we get into the application. Like many newsstand applicants, she immigrated to this country from Pakistan in 2000. She has a 14-year-old son who's now at the age where doesn't need to be watched all the time, and she is very interested in opening up a business of her own. And as is common, newsstands provide a readily available first business for many immigrants to our country. My office is involved with many newsstand applications before this commission. You don't see my face quite often because most of the time, we're able to come to an agreement with your very excellent staff who always works with us in a professional manner and in a way to try to get applicants approved and find compromise. And so we like working with your staff, and it's never my intention to come here, and I always feel that there's already been some sort of failure if I have to come here, because it means that we've not been able to come to an agreement with your very good staff. In this particular situation, in this application, and I'll get into the underlying merits of it in a moment, I think your staff, given prior rejections at this site, properly felt that they couldn't put this on the consent agenda, and I think that is understandable. Ms. Sheikh, as is her right, wanted the ultimate decision to come from this commission, and that's what brings us here today. So, I think just to get straight to the core of why I'm here. See the red box there? That is the proposed location. This is the DOT approved site plan. I'll get into the dimensions in a moment. And here is the the montage of what the newsstand would look like. The basis for your staff's suggestion that the newsstand application be rejected was that 2 applications have previously been rejected at this location in the past. One in the year 2000 and one in 2012. And they felt constrained to not put that item on the consent agenda, which again I say is understandable. We later submitted a supplemental memorandum to your staff, which ultimately did not persuade them. And what I'd like to do today is talk about 3 things. Number 1, why this application is different than the 2000 application that was rejected. Number 2, how it can be made different from the 2012 application that was rejected. And number 3, just a broader comment on the real substantive objection here, which is blocking a view corridor of the Broadway corridor down to Columbus Circle. So, number 1, how is this different from 2000? The 2000 application that you rejected was before the coordinated street furniture franchise, which of course everybody knows was implemented in 2003 to create a uniform design for newsstands from a franchisee. It used to be Samusa, now that company was bought by J.C. Deco. And so in 2000, it was not this design. It was a different design. As anyone who's lived in New York since before 2003 remembers, newsstands used to have a somewhat ramshackle appearance. They were not uniform in design. They sort of stuck out of whatever environment they were put in. And although I couldn't find this in the record, it's my understanding, our office has done this for 30 years, I haven't, but our office has, is that the feeling was that that newsstand would basically just stick out in the area that it was suggested for. And probably would have. It was green in design, it didn't coordinate with any of the other street furniture, and so it was rejected. Come 2012, well, before I say that, let me just make clear that it is part of the coordinated street furniture design. And I think that's important because there are other items on this Broadway corridor that are consistent with the similar design of this newsstand. If we go, this was on some of the supplemental materials I submitted, about here, about mid-block between 61st Street and 60th Street, which is far closer to Columbus Circle, which is here, you have a bus shelter, which is designed by J.C. Decaux. Where should I be pointing this at to make it work? Sorry, did I break it? No. There. You have a bus, thank you. You have a bus shelter, so right around here. You have a bus shelter designed by J.C. Decaux. It's a similar look and feel. It's everybody knows what the bus shelters look like. It's the same glassy design. And it's even closer to Columbus Circle than this particular newsstand. We've had the installation of Wi-Fi kiosks since not only 2000, but 2012, which are just about a foot smaller in height than these newsstands, but also the same, more modern metal glassy design. So I don't think this newsstand would really stand out the way a non-prototypical one would have in the year 2000. Moving to 2012, that application was also denied. That was one of the prototypical newsstands then. I think this commission essentially just followed form pursuant to your general guideline that we don't reconsider applications at locations that have been rejected. The arguments that I'm making today certainly weren't put before you then. And another potential difference that we are certainly open to is the size of the newsstand. So of course the way this process works is that we at the very beginning of the application process, after this, when we submit to Consumer Affairs for a review of the dimensions by DOT, have to pick what dimensions we're going to use. And the franchisee, J.C. Decaux, has standard dimensions. You can't just pick whatever you want. We picked, as we often do, the largest size possible because that in these small businesses, every square foot counts for their business, for their ability to carry on a business that's going to be successful. And so if we're ever able to get the largest size possible, we always obviously our goal. However, as often is the case, by the time DOT has approved the dimensions of the site plan, and we get to your staff's review, they often raise an objection to the particular size and ask if we would be amenable to resizing the newsstand to something that's more in keeping with the guidelines that they prefer. We expressed in this case our willingness. I believe in this one the request was to make this newsstand narrower, so instead of being 6 feet wide, it would be 5 feet wide, so take a foot off, and that would have been more acceptable to your staff. And typically, if that's the only objection, then again, I'm never here because we just redesigned it. DOT goes out and re-inspects, and we get put on the consent agenda. But in this case, of course, your staff had the 2 objections. Not only was it the size, but it was the previous rejections and the view corridor. And so we never were able to get to a meeting of the minds where we could say, okay, we're going to resize and resubmit. But we are willing to do so. Not only are we willing to resize to a 5 by 12, and this commission has on rare occasion issued conditional approvals where you say, we will approve it, subject to a re-inspection by DOT under a smaller size that we are okay with and comfortable with. We would be willing to resize this to the absolute smallest width that the franchisee offers, which is 4 by 12. So coming in to, taking the 2 feet off of this. And the reason why I think that's relevant is that does make this application different than the 6 by 12 that you disapproved in 2012. It would make the profile of the newsstand much more narrow. And I think that sort of leads me to the third and final comment I wanted to leave you with, which is that I'm not sure who here, if anyone was on this commission in 2000, and I understand and respect your preferences for your own workload reasons to not want to be regularly reconsidering applications that have been disapproved, and my office certainly is not in the business of regularly resubmitting applications that have been disapproved. But I think you do have the right to reach your own conclusions here as to whether you believe that the placement of this newsstand would significantly disrupt the view corridor down to Columbus Circle. And it's my submission to you that I don't think it does, to an extent that would require denial of this application. I just, given the other street furniture that's on this street, we have Wi-Fi kiosks across the street, which are quite tall. As I said, down out here, we have a bus shelter. My submission to you is I don't think that this newsstand would significantly disrupt the view corridor, especially given the smallest profile newsstand that we'd be willing to be able to go to, which is the 4-footer. So I put that for your consideration, and happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Do we have anyone here from the public? Phil Gordon?
Yes, I'm here.
Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phil Gordon. I'm the manager of field operations for the Lincoln Square Business Improvement District, which is where this proposed location falls. As was previously discussed, the Design Commission has already rejected this site on 2 different occasions. The Community Board 7, which is where this location falls, has also rejected this location at least 3 times in the past, going back to 2011. The most recent rejection, which was May 2nd of last year, so just about a year ago, came with a request to DCA to remove this proposed location out of the database of available newsstand locations. In 2009, the Allegro, which is the building in front of where this proposed location would sit, had applied for street trees lining the Broadway perimeter to help beautify the area. That application was subsequently denied. What was cited was a steam line running underneath the curb. So we think it's questionable whether excavation of a newsstand could even sort of take place here. Also, as you can see from the pictures here, the newsstand, we think, would at least potentially block sight lines inside the bank and to the ATM vestibule, which we think is a potential safety concern. In addition, Melissa's Deli, which is sort of right here, a small business that sells many sort of competing products, and we also think that would be an issue. Finally, in 2006, there was a failed newsstand just 1 block north, so on the northwest corner of 62nd and Broadway, which the bid had to actually petition DCA to have removed. It sat vacant, dormant, and rotting away for 18 months prior to Department of Sanitation actually removing it. Lastly, there's also an existing newsstand just 2 blocks south, the northeast corner of 60th and Broadway. For all these reasons, we urge the Design Commission to once again deny this application.
Thank you.
Can I briefly respond?
No.
I haven't passed, no?
No. All right, but if there are questions for you,
yes.
you more than can respond. Are there any questions for the applicant and his attorney?
Did someone ask me if I had any responses to that?
I mean, let me give you our response, and then we can give you. I think 2 things are critical. One is that we do have policies we've worked hard on to determine where a newsstand is appropriate and where it's not. There were many reasons, I am sure, for the rejections previously, including the one that this particular newsstand would block potentially significant views of the many, many people leaving Lincoln Center, walking south on the Broadway sidewalk, of one of what is a major urban vista in the limited number of urban vistas we have in New York, unlike Paris, for example, which would be a Columbus Circle. And that was one of the reasons, in addition to the potential of visual clutter, that this particular sidewalk location was rejected. Our policy also clearly indicates that unless the site conditions have changed, right, we don't welcome, we'll accommodate you whenever you choose to come, but we don't review previous denials unless not your view of the application has changed, but whether the specific site conditions have changed. That has not occurred in this case. There's nothing different about this location today than there was when it was rejected for potentially stopping people's sight lines of major significant monuments in New York, i.e. Columbus Circle. So unless there is which is not shown here at all, conclusive evidence of a specific change, I believe this commission, I don't mean to speak for all of my colleagues, will reject this application again because it has not met the standards which we worked hard to specifically identify and promote to give a sense of global fairness, as you've articulated, works generally for you, right? And we think that's a better system than one that's arbitrary. So we welcome the fact that you've had a good experience. This is a case where this particular application simply does not meet the criteria we've established, and we will have to, in my opinion, reject it because of that. That's the way the system has to work. So that's the response I would give. I would take the good feeling I think you've established and our apologies to the applicant, the actual applicant, and our encouragement to find a site that can be approved. We would welcome you as an operator of a newsstand. There are many available newsstand sites. This is not one of them, and that we have to accept.
In response, and I have no intention of going in circles on this, and I appreciate your candor, and the point is well taken. The only two things I would just say in response to that are number one, understanding and acknowledging the hard work that was put into your guidelines and not discrediting that at all. There's a reason that you call them guidelines, because they're not promulgated rules. And the import of that is that you must deviate from them from time to time. You can't apply them across the board uniformly. Otherwise, they have the effect of being promulgated rules and are basically guidelines in name only. So we take your guidelines seriously. We respect them on most, if not all, vast majority of our applications. We come to an agreement and are able to do something that everyone could live with. But I do think on occasion you do have to deviate from them, and in order for them to maintain their character as guidelines. Number two, just very briefly, on the point of well, nothing's really changed in the past. Point well taken. I would just reiterate that the countervailing that I've always put to this commission is that while there's obviously a need for basically preclusive effect moving forward of applications that you've denied, I think it's more fair for applicants when that is applied only to arguments that are made in support of the application, not particular locations themselves. Of course, Ms. Sheikh was never before you. She had not made her arguments before you. She does have different arguments than what was made in the past. And so I do think it's fair to give those a listen, and you have given those a listen, and it's much appreciated. I'll just leave you with, unless there's other questions, the submission I ended with in my presentation in the beginning, which is that I think each and every member of this commission has the right to reach your own conclusions as to whether this newsstand has applied for, with the promise that we'd be willing to make of reducing the size to being a narrow 4 feet. I would submit to you that it does not significantly impact the views of Columbus Circle. You could barely even see any, in the supplemental materials we provided. You have to walk several more blocks before you even start seeing the globe or the Christopher Columbus statue. I just don't think it really does. But of course, that decision ultimately lies with you, and if you disagree with me on that, then of course Ms. Sheikh gets denied. But I do think that I would submit to you that you want to consider the alternate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, or is there anyone else here willing to testify? Seeing none, does anyone have a motion? Would anyone make a motion to approve? So seeing there's no motion, you do? You want one? So someone should make a motion and then we'll reject it. I'm not sure that's true, but let's do it. Okay, is there a second? Someone has to say it. Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
All in favor? Okay. All in rejected. All right, we're unanimous in rejecting. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Great.